This morning on Houston Newsmakers, the 83rd legislative session with two special sessions, what it means to Texans. State Senator Dan Patrick is here to talk about his run for lieutenant governor and what he considers success in this year's legislative session. Senator Rodney Ellis also here with his take on this year's successes and failures and the future of the Democratic Party in Texas. Protests continued here in Houston in the wake of the Trayvon Martin verdict, the stand your ground law that started it all, and what Texans should or should not do about its law.
From KPRC Local 2, this is Houston Newsmakers with Cambrell Marshall.
In signing House Bill 2 today, we celebrate and further cement the foundation on which the culture of life in Texas is built upon.
With a stroke of a pen on Thursday, Governor Perry signed the much-debated abortion bill into law. It was one of the main reasons for the special sessions this legislative season. We'll talk about what else was accomplished this morning. Good morning and welcome to Houston Newsmakers. I'm joined this morning by State Senator Dan Patrick. He's the chair of the Senate Education Committee, also a member of the Criminal Justice, Finance, Higher Education, Redistricting. You've been busy.
Been very busy. Been very busy.
Good morning and welcome home. I like to say welcome home because KPRC was where you were for many weekends on this show.
And it's great to be back. We were just talking. You had a big birthday last December. I was here right before your big birthday. We won't mention what number that was. So it's 7 months later, we're back. It has been a long session. We're still working, and we will know how much further we're going. Well,
right now, one of the things, though, that came out even before the session is over is that you've announced you're going to be running for lieutenant governor. I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Why did you decide to do that, and why is now the time to do it?
Well, I waited till session was over and the first special session. I wanted to keep that separate from my job as a senator. And of course, we didn't know there would be a second special session, and the wheels were in motion, and we had made the decision. So we did announce after the session. And for me, you know, I've been in the Texas Senate now for 4 sessions, and we've accomplished a lot. Put In God We Trust in the Senate, Under God in the Pledge, cut the business taxes for the businesses at $1 million or less, passed the charter bill this session, passed the sonogram bill, and part of this omnibus pro-life bill was my bill. And I feel like it's now time to take this opportunity. I think there's an opportunity to step forward to bring authentic conservative leadership. Lieutenant Governor has done a good job, but he's been there 10 years. This is an historic election, by the way. Cambrell, do you realize that we're going to have a new governor, new attorney general, new controller, new land commissioner, new agriculture commissioner? No party in the history of the nation that I know of has changed out every office in a primary. Sometimes you could lose in a general. So the lieutenant governor at this point is the only one still running for re-election, and he has a right to run. There are 2 other people running and myself, and we have a right to run on our vision. I'm not running against anyone. I'm running for my conservative values, my vision, border security, continue our education reform, property taxes that are going to start climbing again now that we're out of this recession.
Hasn't this Republican Party already been pretty conservative? It's not. I mean, it seems to be fairly conservative as it is.
As a conservative, and I am a leading conservative in the Senate, we have done a lot of things, but there's a lot that hasn't been done. Again, border security, continuing the focus that we began this session on school reform, which is vital for everyone. Republican, Democrat should be a nonpartisan issue. Property taxes. I've filed bills every session to reduce property taxes, and I have not been able to get leadership behind the wheel, you know, putting their shoulder to the wheel to get it done. And I feel that until we have a leader who's going to make that a priority, people are not going to be able to afford to live in their homes. We're going to get back to the 7, 8, 9%. So again, it's not about David Dewhurst. It's not about the other 2 opponents. It's about me wanting to be a leader in this state because I believe we need someone who has energy, who has passion, and is going to lead on conservative issues and solve problems that all Texans want solved that have not been solved yet.
And you think you could do a better job of getting those bills to where they need to be to get in a position to be passed?
Yes, and for this reason, when you're a senator, you can accomplish a lot. But when you become a chairman of a major committee, you can accomplish more. Well, this session I became a chairman. I've been on education for 3 sessions, but as chairman I was able to do a lot more. The next step up now is lieutenant governor. And I don't go into this lightly, but these are big issues, Cambrell, that we cannot have an education system that fails 20% of our students statewide and up to 40 and 50% of our minority students in our inner cities. We cannot have people taxed out of their homes. Do you realize in Texas you can pay off your home and still rent it in your years of retirement from the state. That has to end. The business tax must end. And while Washington discusses the immigration issue, and it's their responsibility, it's our problem, and this is a law and order issue. We must not allow terrorists potentially across the border, but the drug cartels are a major issue right here in our own city. And we've done a good job, but we haven't done enough. And one of the reasons I voted against the budget this time was we cut spending on border security. We cut spending to fight criminal gangs. At a time when we just arrested last week one of the drug cartel members not far from our border. The #1 issue for any legislator, Republican or Democrat, is to protect the public, to protect you and your family and your property. And as long as our border is not as secure as it can be, then we are all at risk. Again, we are the second line of defense. The federal government is on the front line,
right.
But there's so much more we can do. And when you're cutting spending in that area, that is not the right direction to go at this time.
Why was it now the time for the abortion bill? That was because earlier, before the session started, it looked like that was not something that was a high priority, and it became that toward the end of the session.
Well, it wasn't that it became a high priority at the end of the session. We have this 21 vote rule in the Senate. You need 21 out of 31 senators to bring a bill to the floor. We had 20 votes. We were one short. So we had 20 out of 31 senators. And we had a number of bills that were in that position. And this was one of those bills where we had every Republican and one Democrat, Senator Lucio from the Valley. We just were one vote short. And so the special session was called to address a number of issues. And this was one of those issues that the governor decided to put on the call. And I know there was, there was the filibuster should have never happened, by the way. It was, in my view, leadership. Look, we're the majority party. We should be able to get things done. We had 4 bills in 30 days, and we get down to 12 hours on the last day with 3 bills to go. That's a lack of planning, a lack of clarity that wouldn't have happened under my watch. But so 3 bills failed: a transportation bill, a criminal justice bill, and the pro-life bill at the end. And so we brought them back, and this is a bill, and I just will say this again, I don't know how anyone could be against it. It ends late-term abortions, which 2/3 of people don't support, and it improves women's health care. It brings abortion clinics up to the standard of other surgical centers, and it makes doctors follow FDA guidelines. It's a good bill for women's health.
We're going to talk about that a little bit more in our next couple of segments. We're going to talk transition just a bit now. The George Zimmerman verdict has spurred protests around the country and in Houston, in fact. What, if anything, should be done to change the Texas version of the Stand Your Ground law in which that case was tried? That topic and much more as State Senator Rodney Ellis joins in to talk about that and the success and failure of this legislative session and the challenge for Democrats in the Republican state. That's next when Houston Newsmakers continues. Welcome back to Houston Newsmakers, where we've been talking with State Senator Dan Patrick, and we've now been joined by State Senator Rodney Ellis, chair of the Open Government Committee, member of the Natural Resources, State Affairs, and Transportation Committees. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Hey, what do you think of Senator Patrick's chances as Lieutenant Governor candidate?
I think it'll be a very credible campaign. You know, a lot of things have happened. Assuming the election is on the regular election day, there's a little bit of an advantage for the incumbent, for David Durst, but I wouldn't be so sure that we're going to have our elections when we plan to have them in the spring. But Dan has a lot of statewide appeal. He has a great following, and he's certainly great on his feet. So it's going to be a battle of the Titans, all 4 of them in that race.
Well,
good candidates. All 4 people are good people.
Let's see if we can get some agreement between you two about successes in this legislative session. We don't have a whole lot of time. Yeah. Let's see if we can do that. You've been very aggressive as an education chair.
Yes.
You've been doing that. Let's talk about the education. We know that some money was given back that was taken out of the last budget. Was that a successful process in which the education was funded? It seems they got some money back to do some more educating.
Well, since I had a lot of time, let me
compared to where we were, it was a success. It's all in relative terms. We cut about $5.4 billion in the previous regular session. We put about $3.4 billion back. That's still $2 billion short. Here's a simple run of the numbers. We were about 44th in what we spent per pupil in America compared to other states. Now we're 49th. Only one state spends less than we do. That's Nevada. Now, of course, with a lot of good reforms we have passed,
together.
Dan chaired that committee, bipartisan support, I think, unanimous on
had
virtually all of them.
Almost all our bills.
We're doing some creative stuff, but when you're 49th We used to say thank God for Louisiana. Now we can say thank God for Nevada.
And you've indicated there's more work to be done.
Well, there's a lot more work. We have to continue the reforms, and Rodney knows my heart. My focus was on our students who are failing out of our schools or not graduating prepared to do anything. We have, again, a 40 or 50% dropout rate in some of our inner city schools, or we have students graduating not ready for career. We want every student to have a chance to go to college, but we also have to prepare them for a job. Texas has no future unless we have a qualified workforce. And so that was our focus. And again, Rodney's right. We passed most of our major reform bills, bringing the STAR test from 15 to 5, focusing on career. Our charter schools, almost every bill passed, I think, 31-0. And that's because I led and listened and tried to craft a bill that we could all support. On the money, we just agree to disagree a little bit on that. And I voted against the budget. There were some good things in the budget. I'm glad some dollars went back to education. I voted against the budget again for other issues. But I disagree with...
$2 billion for water. I mean, so look, in the whole, I would say we've done better compared to where we are. All I'm saying is, after all of the reforms that we can think of, and we ought to keep experimenting, at the end of the day, in most areas in state government, you get what you pay for. And I'm just saying it is a challenge. Now, where the money will come from, I don't know, but that is a challenge.
All right, we got 3 minutes. Let's talk, and it may not do it justice, but let's talk about the abortion bill, because you both were on very different sides on this. The governor signed it into law on Thursday, and now it looks like it's headed for a court battle at some point.
There'll be a court battle. Look, first of all, I want to say I agree with the old Bill Clinton model. Abortions ought to be legal, they ought to be rare, and they ought to be safe. I think at the end of the day, you're going to have a court challenge. It'll be a while before that bill goes into effect. But to be honest with you, the United States Supreme Court has ruled that abortion's illegal. I don't want 50 different states coming up with 50 different sets of rules for how you can get access to have that legal procedure. What we ought to do, and I think we can agree on, is put more money into educating kids so that they make wise choices. And we got to look at health care in general for everybody, particularly the kids who are here. Just like we put a lot of time in arguing about whether or not a fetus is a child or not. I want to put more emphasis on looking at the children who are here, making sure we give more mothers and more children access to health care, so maybe more women will not have to make that painful choice.
Well, and that's what we want to see. But this bill, again, focused on 20 weeks, that's 5 months. Ending late-term abortions, and again, even the Huffington Post, which is very liberal, 2-to-1, their readers supported ending late-term abortions. And I said on the Senate floor, while I'm pro-life and I wish a woman wouldn't have an abortion, it is the law of the land, and I value her life as much as the life of the child. A woman who chooses to get an abortion should not be in a substandard facility, and that's what this bill addressed.
Would you agree only 2% of the abortions in Texas would come after 20 weeks? It is rare. Okay, and usually it's Rodney, because of some challenge to the mother's life or some issue with the unborn.
And in some cases that may be, and there were some exceptions made, but 2% could be as many as 1,500 lives.
But I do want to say this,
5 months,
just like we focus,
a terrible death.
Yeah, if the issue is quality of care, all I'm saying is, it's interesting, the same people who give a bleeding heart story about quality of care for women who are making that decision, it's their choice with their bodies, wouldn't lift a finger to talk about quality of care for the 1.5 million Texans who don't have access.
And I can flip that real quick and say those who are pro-choice want that mother to have a choice to have a child or not. Then they don't want that parent to have a choice of where to send that child to school, which was a big fight this session too, because I believe that one of the ways you improve education is giving particularly the poor, particularly in the inner cities, a choice for charters and private schools, and the minority community is supportive of school choice. They want to get out of bad neighborhoods.
93% of the children in Texas are in and will continue to be in public schools. So really, I think, with all due respect, and I really work very well with them, because we find a lot of those wedge issues that we end up arguing over, and really those big ones out there, nobody wants to touch it.
By the way, I've noticed that the interaction between you two, that it is agree to disagree, but you really work well together to try to get things done.
I think all of us.
Well, I don't call it a club. I call it respect. I respect the views of people who disagree with me, as long as they do it in in an agreeable way, and we do. We've debated each other. We've had some pretty good debates on the floor.
We've had some maybe Dan is running because we're agreeing too much.
No,
maybe I'm persuading you, or you persuading persuading me.
Well, I respectfully...
I hope I'm persuading you.
I respectfully want to move on.
All right, okay.
We're going to talk on the other side of this break about some of the... Because any chance that you have to get things done at a statewide level means you have to get more Democrats elected, and that hasn't happened on a statewide level in a while. We'll talk about that after this break. You know, the George Zimmerman trial as well. That was in Stanford, Florida. But many communities across the country have been reacting. What changes, if any, need to be made in Texas regarding the Stand Your Ground law? Protesters in Houston and other parts of the state and the country asking for change. What can or should be done? And that's next when Houston Newsmakers continues.
Sending a terrible message to other little black and brown boys that you can't walk fast, you can't walk slow. So what do? I mean, how do you get home without people knowing or either assuming that you're doing something wrong? Trayvon wasn't doing anything wrong.
Heartbreaking comments of Sabrina Fulton, the mom of Trayvon Martin. Of course, any way you look at it, the killing of Trayvon was tragic. The not guilty verdict being looked at very differently by blacks and whites. Can you understand how that's touched the nerve across the country and in Houston? I think it's looked at from different viewpoints, but is there...
I know how it touches a nerve with me. I've got a 14-year-old kid, and I live in a very diverse neighborhood near Rice University. He does errands down the street. And there are times when I have followed him just thinking, growing up in this household, in this era, colorblind, his friends of all colors, will he think about things about like how he dresses, how he acts, in case someone in our neighborhood were to see him simply picking up the mail in the newspapers and putting it in a neighbor's home? I mean, it's a real challenge. I mean, I think that we ought to review our version of the Castle Doctrine in Texas. Our notion of what they're calling Stand Your Ground in Florida is somewhat different. We ought to at least be willing to ask the hard questions. I mean, a kid getting shot by a neighborhood watch person, a lot of people in Texas have guns. About 5 of our colleagues on the Senate floor
probably more than 5.
Yeah, that we know of at least. It makes me think twice sometimes when we in a debate. But look, when emotions are tense, strange things happen. And in Texas, because so many of our citizens carry guns, one of you two may have one now. I think we ought to at least look at what we have on the books in place in Texas.
However, where you have states that have Stand Your Ground or Castle Doctrine like we have in Texas, we have less crime. It makes those who are thinking of committing a crime a little bit more wary. For example, Chicago has had some of it. They've just changed their laws. I mean, they're averaging several murders a day of black children, black-on-black crime, and they have some tough gun laws. So, I mean, they had very lax gun laws, and they had more murders. So I don't want to step back from where we are on Castle Doctrine. I think it helps protect black, white, and brown in our communities, to protect their property, their lives, and their families. This is a tragedy because this young man was killed. No one knows the facts now except Zimmerman. He's the only one alive who really knows the facts. I abide by the jury's decision, and I respect the jury's decision. We have got to get away, but it's also a tragedy for Zimmerman as well. But the thing that concerns me is we've gotten to this point in this country where every time there's a decision by a jury that someone doesn't like, they take to the streets. That is not healthy for our society. That is not healthy for any civilization. We have got to respect the rule of law, whether we like it or we don't.
People have to have confidence in our judicial system. And this case gives people reason to have pause.
But not reason to go out and be Bob Rule.
I didn't say change anything. Right. What I said was we ought to at least be willing to review it. We ought to see whether or not the laws we have in place in Texas have a disproportionate impact on certain groups of people. Hey, think about our previous discussion. The court has ruled, by the way, on that other subject, that abortion is illegal. Part of the issue in Texas is that a lot of people just don't like that decision. So they look for ways to get around it.
But no, we're looking for ways to change the law.
You're looking for ways to get around what the Supreme Court has said we can do. But it is a legal procedure. Here's what I'm saying. It's common for us to have people who have outrage because, look, our judicial system is not fair. No, I mean, there are issues of race.
It's okay to be upset and so forth, but not to take to the street every time something like that.
Look what happened in Oakland. Look what happened in Los Angeles.
If you take to the streets in a legal way and you're exercising your First Amendment right, look, let's just be real. What brought about the civil rights laws that are in place in this country, some of my colleagues would like to displace, by the way, was not an easy, was not a pretty, was not a little conversation sitting down with cufflinks on this station. I mean, it took but civilized disobedience within the realm of what the law permitted to create a dialogue.
But first of all, I don't know any of your colleagues who want to turn back the civil rights movement. And number two is what I saw in closing down the LA freeway, closing down the intersection in Oakland and other cities. I didn't see that as organized or legal disobedience.
Well,
I saw that as mob rule. What we saw in the state capitol the first time in the filibuster was a mob rule. That was a
both
terrible
on
night.
the floor, might I add.
No, that was a terrible.
What you all did, with all due respect, was just trample the rules. So how could you expect?
Let's not go back. Let's not go back there anymore. Let me go. I got about a minute left, and I want very quickly. The Democrats are in trouble statewide, have been for a long time. What do you need to do to change?
We got to get participation levels up in Texas considerably. We're virtually near the bottom. And let me tell you, the demographics, more than anything, will change the face of politics in Texas, regardless of which party you're in.
I disagree a little bit. For example, there are many Hispanics and Latinos who are pro-life Catholics, and they're voting for Republicans because of that one issue alone.
You guys better get on the program for immigration reform, and you're not. I think that's going to kill you.
And your party needs to get on the side of school choice and on the pro-life issue.
Now, this is going to be interesting. Somebody's going to go back and see Dan Patrick consulting for the Democrats and Rodney Ellis consulting for the Republicans.
I want Dan. He's doing such a good job for Republicans. Stay over there and just keep them moving to the right.
We will stay conservative. You can trust that.
State Senator Dan Patrick.
As always, thank you,
State
sir.
Senator Rodney Ellis. Thank you both for being here. It's always fun and enjoyable. I can actually take a break when they're here. Thank you guys for coming in. We have a special program lined up for next week. I'll talk about that next when Houston Newsmakers continues. Next week, we'll be taking a look at why some Houstonians are protesting the Zimmerman verdict, the Houston connection to the trial, and why the outcome was settled at jury selection. And what's the end game? What's next week? That's right here on Houston Newsmakers. If you'd like to join our Newsmakers conversation on Twitter, you can follow us on Twitter at #HOU Newsmakers. And if there are subjects or stories you'd like for us to tackle, you can also email me at HoustonNewsmakers@click2Houston.com. I want to thank you to my guests for joining me this morning and to all of you for tuning in. If you'd like information on today's program or previous shows, go to click2Houston.com under the community banner. Click on Newsmakers. Have a great day, everybody. I'll see you back here again next week.